How do you think organizations should balance that? The speed at what they are trying to innovate, but while at the same time maintain the safety all along to do better?
I would answer this but probably in a layman's simple terms. And finger in the air, I will ask you the same question. How much of work in a corporate world you think is summarization? Pick up a number. Just summarization.
I don't know, maybe 40%?
Exactly. It is roughly around 50 to 60%.
Yeah, very
So
close.
50 to 60% of the work that people do in a large corporate is summarization. I would rather recommend you start your AI project with summarization, which will be less indexing, which you have to less worry in terms of guardrails perspective, and which is much easier to demonstrate returns on investment as well.
Welcome to Discover Dialogues podcast, powered by TechDogs. The world of business and technology is evolving at breakneck speed. AI breakthroughs, digital transformation, and game-changing innovations are reshaping industries every day. On this show, we dive into the trends, ideas, and strategies driving the future. We're sitting down with industry leaders, innovators, and disruptors to bring you fresh insights, bold perspectives, and real conversations that matter. So plug in, tune in, and let's discover what's next.
Today on the show, we are joined by Sandip Wadje, Managing Director and Global Head of Emerging Technology Operational Risks and Intelligence at BNP Paribas. With over 2 decades of experience across cybersecurity, technology risk, and consulting, Sandip has worked closely with global enterprises and board-level stakeholders to shape secure and scalable strategies. In this conversation, we explore how organizations can securely scale AI while balancing speed, risk, and trust, from the often overlooked vulnerabilities in AI systems to the broader risks emerging across technologies like quantum and digital assets, and what it truly takes for leaders to stay ahead in such a fast evolving landscape. Let's dive in.
Welcome to another episode of TechDogs Discover Dialogues. Sandeep, it's a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Likewise, thank you very much for the opportunity.
So, Sandeep, before we kind of dive into AI, we talk about risk and security. Uh, I want to start with your journey, because from what I've read about you, and we talked about briefly just before this, you've had a unique path, across consulting, then industry, and now obviously you're doing leading emerging technology risk at a global scale. So let's begin there. You know, Walk me through your journey.
Sure. So it's been a very interesting ride. Something you probably did not notice if you got scroll down from my LinkedIn profile. I started my career as a government officer. Actually, I was a class 1 officer in Ministry of IT. So I started my career deploying C-band and Ku-band earth stations and building network operation centers. And then I started this in 2001, and then I decided to one of my clients actually introduced me to the world of cybersecurity, and I thought, oh, let's give it a try. So I did my CISSP in 2005, CISA in 2006, and that kind of opened doors for things that were to come. And since then, it has been a very interesting ride. I was with KPMG for 7.5 years. I've been with BNP Paribas for 8.5 years. In between, I had some interesting stints at Deloitte, JP Morgan, worked at BT and SecureWorks, also worked at a company, Risk IQ, which was acquired by Microsoft a few years back. And it's been also quite fulfilling when you look at the work I've done. I started with network operations, hands-on experience in implementing firewalls, configuring Cisco routers, and then all of a sudden I'm consultant doing security operations center advisory, doing large identity and access management project, and then switching to threat intelligence at Risk IQ. And probably all of this mixture of experience opened doors for me in terms of the role I'm doing today, because I've had that fair experience of working with technical people, working with managing directors on the business side, and also working with chief risk officers and CIOs and CISOs. And then it kind of gives you confidence that, oh, yes, sure, I think I can handle cloud, AI, digital assets, and threat intelligence, and then quantum as well. So quantum is also a big focus for me.
And was there a defining moment, or a shift that kind of said that this is a space that I would love to be in and continue being in?
Oh, certainly, and I can definitely give credit where it is due. And it was my client Anil Joshi at Garware. He's like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "What are you doing?" I was sitting in my office. I was government office. I'm sitting in my office like, "Yeah, let's wrap up the day." And he's like, "What are you doing?" There's some people from Isaka in town. Let's go and listen to them what they're saying. And it was Sunil Bakshi and Ashok Pawar. They traveled from Pune to tell us like, hey, this is a brand new opportunity. You should do some CISA certification, learn about information systems and controls. And that led to like benchmarking security certifications. And, coming from India, you're like, what is the highest paying certification? I was like, let's find that out first. CISA is good, but is there something that gives better money? And I think even today, the highest paid certification is CCIE. And back then, the second highest paid certification was CISSP. And I'm like, yeah, sure, I want to do this. I think it is still a 6-hour exam. It is still one of the toughest certification. And then that was the defining moment because that led to the whole career shift, getting into cybersecurity. And then I haven't looked back since then.
When I look at your journey, it almost mirrors, the evolution of technology in itself. To be honest, because it's been more than 2 decades now, and
Yes.
technology has grown so much since then. And I want to kind of build on that because I think what's actually happening on the ground today um, is something similar, right? Because AI is almost rapidly moving from experimentation to real world deployments, and I think maybe more 2026 even more now. And then there's that new layer of complexity that's started to, or business is starting to look at. It's about security, it's about governance, it's also about risk, and perhaps from your vantage point, given the fact that you're working across emerging technologies, okay, it's a very different space to be in. Am I right? And you know how do you think that businesses should approach this? What is that often perhaps looks gets often overlooked, okay, or what are those risks that they should be watching out for?
Yes. So I think first thing, let's understand like what is emerging technology. We all say emerging technology. Emerging technology is evolution of an existing technology or a brand new technology. But essentially, it's a technology for which there is not enough regulatory clarity or no regulation at all. And that's what happened with AI, right? There was nothing. And after ChatGPT showed up, like everyone is like, yeah, let's do EU AI Act. And everyone started thinking about regulations. So emerging tech is where regulations have not been thought through. The controls have not been thought through. And then essentially, you have to do education first before you can start talking about what are the right things to be done from a security and governance perspective, because it's a brand new area for everyone. Like, look at cloud. And we are still trying to mature on cloud. Like, even after probably 8, 10, 15 years of cloud, we are still working on Digital Operational Resilience Act. We are having, guidelines for outsourcing to cloud service providers, and it is still evolving. So that's what happens. And sometimes that evolution is like cloud, we are still like 10, 15 years, we're still building controls. And AI is the same thing, and same is with blockchain, which is a big part of my work. And then it is also the same with, I would say, quantum as well. So emerging tech is very fascinating because what happens is then there is no guidance from the regulator. There are no control baselines. And then in that circumstances, everyone has a perspective. And particularly like, even if cloud, for example, may have been like, Sandip has 10 years of deep architectural experience and, he's the only one qualified to speak on cloud. But topic like AI, everyone has opinion. And then what you really have to do is like get everyone on the same page saying, hey, here is my understanding of what AI means to me. What does AI mean to you? And then we are able to create that shared perspective to say, okay, can we now agree together what is our definition of this emerging technology, in this case AI? And if we are on the same page, now let us discuss what is our shared understanding of what those guardrails look like. Because the second stage is then guardrails, and then we all know on AI, everyone has different perspective on guardrails, and a lot of that also goes back to your upbringing, the society you live in. Because for some people, AI is about fairness, transparency. So for some people, AI is all about productivity, and you have to kind of balance both. So I think again, with emerging tech, the whole balancing innovation, risk, and governance becomes very interesting. And I think communication plays a big role in kind of talking to people and getting them on board. And then that's a big part of kind of what I do. Yeah.
And looking beyond AI, are there any specific technologies you feel that have so much underestimated risk, uh, and perhaps everyone should be paying closer attention to?
I think there are two areas, not just one. Um, Quantum is getting attention now, but I think people underestimated the level of rewiring we'll have to do when quantum arrives. So particularly in terms of post-quantum cryptography, uh, to find, like, encryption is everywhere in everything we use, right from browser to essentially the data center infrastructure. And to find legacy encryption and fix it throughout the organization, it's a significant rewiring. And even if you say, you know what, it's 10 years away, it's still a very short time frame to kind of do the entire rewiring from a PQC perspective. So I think the timelines are what is happening right now. And I definitely give a GenAI analogy. Like, there was 7 years of trial and error on GenAI. And when I go to conferences, I ask this question, like, who has read the first white paper that was written by Google engineers on the large transformers, and no one has read it actually. And then that's the whole thing with technology. Like, there was 7 years of trial and error before this chat GPT was shown to the world. And what we have to remind ourselves is we often miss the tipping point in technology, and then everyone is trying to catch up with it. So quantum is one area where I think we are spending too much time debating when it's going to arrive, instead of preparing for it and getting ready and saying, okay, whenever it arrives, it's a still significant rewiring to be done for a lot of the enterprise, including third parties and including those who run the internet as well. So it's a lot of, not just a company has to do some work, the society has to work together as well as to how do we secure this whole thing. And the second part is digital assets and blockchain. And then what has happened is blockchain is often correlated with cryptocurrencies, and a lot of people, and I'm quite surprised that, like, quite a good population in the industry, they don't understand the digital assets projects that are going in the industry. They still they correlate it to crypto, and they think, oh, it's a cryptocurrency is down right now. And I'm like, the blockchain technology has nothing to do with crypto, because you have to look at payment and settlements, stablecoin implementations. You have to look at tokenization of real world assets, and a lot of these things are moving at a quite rapid pace. And while we are at it, actually, I completely missed another one: robotics. People are completely missing the robotics thing. And particularly with Gen AI, there is significant. And I recommend everyone to read the Morgan Stanley report that was issued last year on humanoid robots. It's a fascinating read. It's quite scary as well, the level of projections they have in terms of humanoid robots adoption in the industry. If I'm not wrong, I think China has filed the highest number of patents on humanoid robots, roughly 5,000. And after US and everyone else. So again, the robotics trends are getting missed because we are hyper focused on Gen AI.
And how about autonomous? Because I was just thinking about it. How about autonomous agents or autonomous humanoid robots? I mean, do you think that's also going to be one of those risk areas?
Yes, but we've already seen with OpenClaw the level of autonomy agents can have. And when we talk about a lot of these autonomy, uh, it's essentially exposing that piece of technology directly to LLMs. And then, of course, it gets the perspective and the viewpoint to do whatever it wants to do. So I think what we really need to do is we need to move towards small language models era. And that's a much better kind of transition, I would say, from a technology perspective. What we should be looking at. What has happened so far is a lot of experiments directly on LLM, and then obviously you get unexpected outcomes, and that's quite common. So autonomous AI definitely is is an area of concern, and particularly with the level of experiments that are going on in the industry right now.
What are perhaps the mind shifts that you need to make, or the capabilities that you need to build to be ahead of these risks? I mean, across all of them, be it humanoid robots, be it autonomous agents, be it digital assets. And the first one I think you mentioned was, I forgot. What was the first one?
So I talked about quantum, I talked about digital
Yeah,
assets.
quantum. So all of these, what do you think organizations should be doing to stay ahead of the risks associated with these emerging technologies?
That's a great question, and I'll, I'll 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 pick up emerging tech as like one consolidated domain, and I'll pick up AI as another domain. If you look at the emerging tech as one consolidated area, like everything that's going on, whether it is geopolitical intelligence, whether it is quantum, digital assets, and AI, um, the way banks operate, particularly, and this analogy can be extended to every other large institution, is use the analogy of run the bank and change the bank. And what's happening now is the it's coming to an inflection point where it is almost like difficult to expect one person or one department to run the bank and change the bank at the same time. I've said this a lot, that it's just not possible for one person to run the bank and then learn everything about AI, learn everything about quantum. So I think what we really need to do is like, hey, here is persona or a department that's looking into changing the bank, and here is a person or department that is running at the bank, and there is a handshake between them too. Because otherwise, what is happening right now, and that's what the issue in the industry is, the executives have conflicting priorities, and they're juggling the balls, right? And then how much you can do as a human to learn AI one day, to learn quantum another day, and it just becomes difficult. Even if, let us say, for example, um, you hire people, but it still comes down to the same board level responsibilities. And then I think that is the big impact I see with whatever is going on in the technology industry today. That run the bank and change the bank, almost coming to an inflection point where they need to like separate pathways because technology is moving so fast. And if you look at AI, which is very interesting, and when was the last time you heard that some financial institution appointed a head of data quality? Never. There was never a person. Yeah, there you go. There was never a person responsible for data quality. There was a person responsible for data protection. There was a person responsible for handling data and monetizing data, and working that data for different business users. But data quality was largely kind of ignored. And then where it comes to is technology, and again it's the same thing. Whether it is cloud also had a rapid growth, right? So the way technology has progressed so fast in last 10-15 years, a lot of stakeholders, and particularly I would say CISOs, they haven't had enough time to work with business on understanding data and access. Now what you see is again additional drain on them. And look at the current situation with Mythos. So what are you going to do now? Are you going to build the AI infrastructure to fight like attackers using, Mythos kind of capability, or you're going to sit down with business, implementing guardrails in their AI applications, is setting up, right access permissions or cleaning up the data. And now this is a good example, like to expect one person to implement AI native defense so that they can deal with, attackers using Mythos kind of capability, and then at the same time sit down with business, clean up access permission. It's too much to be expected, and that is also creating that I would say inflection point or stress in the industry. But I think AI, I'm quite worried, simply because the industry as a whole and the technology industry as a whole, we never had opportunity to like look back in our own kitchen and say, hey, I need to sit with business to clean up this data, fix data quality, fix access permissions, and that creates a much wider attack surface in terms of probably what's going to come.
So on that note, are you thinking that businesses or organizations are actually moving a little too fast in deploying, AI and everything to do with agentic systems or autonomous systems without actually understanding the risks?
Yes, and there is a reason for that. The macroeconomic drivers is the era of free money is gone. We live in the world of high interest, high inflation. We have had 3 wars now since COVID. And what happens then is, if you're running a large financial institution, even though you might be making profits, you are always worried about what is the next geopolitical event, what is the next macroeconomic event. And then what happens then is the executive priority is to hang on to liquidity. That's quite natural. When circumstances are uncertain, you want to save money, and you want to, like, I don't know what the next event is going to be, so I would rather have that capital with me, and then that's where then I'm sure you must have seen this. Have you made any executive, particularly in technology, who said, I have unlimited budget? No, it's cost cutting. It's cost cutting everywhere, and the reason for that is essentially executives see AI as an opportunity to have that cost cutting and liquidity, so that they can deal with this uncertain kind of macroeconomic environment. So executives are doing what they are doing, and they think AI is the savior, and that's why there is still massive kind of budgets allocated to AI and implementation of AI, with the hope that it will allow them to cut costs. So that is going to continue, but again, then that creates pressure on the technology executives, because now you have to use AI to cut costs, but at the same time, you have so many changes to deal with.
And how do you think organizations should balance that? The speed at what they are trying to innovate, but while at the same time maintain the safety, all along, to do better.
I would answer this like, but probably in a layman's simple terms. And finger in the air, I will ask you the same question. How much of work in a corporate world you think is summarization? Pick up a number. Just summarization. Exactly. It is roughly around 50 to 60%. So 50 to 60% of the work that people do in a large corporate is summarization. I would rather recommend you start your AI project with summarization, which would be less intensive, which you have to less worry in terms of guardrails perspective, and which is much easier to demonstrate returns on investment as well. The where industry has gone wrong is to use AI on and you're essentially using a non-deterministic technology, for high impact use cases like fraud and SOC, and then you're doing trial and error. Why? Use it where it does its job perfectly. GenAI does very good job at summarization. Use it for summarization, get that cash back, then move to write, and then move to reasoning. So I think organizations really definitely, and I've said this a lot, people are burning their fingers with GenAI because they use GenAI to solve a reasoning problem. No, use GenAI to solve simple problems that give you some cash back on the table, then go to the next one. And that's the right way to use that technology. And I think that will make everyone's life easier in terms of reskilling also, because now you are able to do reskilling at a scale where AI adoption is working out. So I think prioritizing Gen AI use cases based on summarize, write, and reason is not done. I don't know why. That's like the simplest way to look at it.
No, I think that's a great perspective. And in your experience, when you're looking at organizations today, I'm sure there's a gap that you see, right? So one is they're trying to manage the risk that AI brings, okay, but at the same time, what actually happening in practice is very different. I mean, I could give you I mean, I'm just trying to build an example out of thin air, but just building on what you said, right? So there's an AI summarization project, perhaps, that they are trying to work on. Okay. Now there are some potential risks that could be associated with it, right? So, for example, where is the model based? Who has access and everything to do with access controls, and then in person, it's perhaps the problem or the risk is entirely different. Do you think that that's the case? Is that something that happens in real life as well?
Oh, yes, for sure. Because because what we are doing is, and I've spent quite significant time on AI governance, security for AI. There are different spotlights, like prioritizing use cases, uh, um, asset inventory of AI use cases, pre-go live governance, data lifecycle management, testing of AI models, pen testing of AI models, AI security operations, and then all of that put together, you are looking at responsible AI, fairness, trust, and all those dimensions. Um, right now in the industry, unfortunately, there is no single solution that brings all these spotlights together. So you go on the industry, and this is big issue. And I've had conversations with practitioners. You have to buy like 6 different solutions to make AI governance work. And I think the simple way to start with is start with output. Start with output and ask yourself, if this output goes wrong, whose neck is on the line? And that person is where you start working from accountability, responsibility, etc. And that works. And I'll give an example. If you have an AI project and it results in operational failure and business is not able to do certain things, then essentially the person doing that business process execution or that particular task has a say. What is happening right now is you're trying to think like, oh, this is an AI project, and I'm going to put some guardrails to secure the model. But it's a non-deterministic tech. Something will go wrong. So you have to work on the scenarios for output that's going to go wrong. And you have to work with people who are actually accountable when stuff goes wrong. And then say, okay, you know what? Maybe this is going to go wrong. And then what do you think is accept? That's what we started with risk management, like residual risk. Like, what is the minimum you will able to handle it? What happens in practice is you focus on the whole attention is like, I will pen test the model, I will put a agentic AI firewall, but you haven't accounted for the failures and the impact of those failures, and then you are actually at a risk of one such failure completely wiping out any ROI that you would have got from that AI project. So I would highly recommend, like, start from the output, uh, and do scenarios on what will happen when this output goes wrong. Maybe the level of accuracy goes down to 0%, 20%, something else happens. And then you will probably do a much better job to understanding, I would say, the risk events or failure types in AI. And then you'll work backwards and say, okay, now I understand if I'm dealing with some of these XYZ scenarios, this is how I'm looking at in terms of what the potential guardrails could be.
And so I'm thinking of this in two perspectives, right? So first is, there could be a talent and a skill issue, right? Because you have these risks, okay, which probably you don't know about, especially in emerging technologies, right? And that's one part of the perspective. That's one challenge. And then there is the tools and perhaps quote unquote the technologies, right? So earlier in the conversation, you said, listen, we for the technologies that we are working with, emerging tech, quote unquote, there could be many scenarios that we've not thought about. Okay, which means that perhaps the tools are also not there yet from an innovation standpoint of view, or they are lagging behind. Okay, which of these is the easier and which of these is the more difficult to manage, and vice versa?
There is quite basics when we all landed in cybersecurity. Something you call as compensatory control, and ask yourself what the compensatory control is before you want to buy another flashy tool. And a lot of people don't do that in the industry. So for example, if you as a financial institution have been practicing access management and data security for last 15 years, you already have fair bit of controls that are in place. So try to think of what is currently in place from a compensatory control perspective, which would reduce it to the acceptable risk before you say, okay, I need a tool to do this. The tendency we have in the industry now, oh, this is something new, I don't know how to deal with, and then I will try to find a tool, and there is always some gap. We all know no security tool provides 100% coverage. So I think you have to work, and I find it quite surprising that people are not looking into the whole concept like, hey, are there any controls existing, or are there any tools existing in my current setup that will mitigate the risk to an acceptable level? If not, I'll go and find another tool. So, and it's a balancing act, and it's tough. It's not easy.
Let's talk a little more about the regulations, right? Because when you're talking about emerging technologies and the risks, associated with it, in that context, uh, do you think the entire global regulatory landscape in that context, uh, and maybe AI also for that matter, uh, is kind of at the moment evolving around only AI, or is there fragmentation in saying where some maybe regions are better at handling regulatory concerns around maybe a specific technology better? I mean, is there a fragmentation that you're seeing?
Uh, yes, and I'll give an example. Look at resilience. Regulators have done fantastic job from Singapore to Europe to US. They understood that resilience is so critical for financial services industry. They all are like, you know what, this one area we really are going to go deep down and make sure you are all compliant, and you are all stable. But then beyond that, there are always those geopolitical drivers, because AI is like, US wants to do something else, EU wants to protect what's going on in Europe. Digital assets is a classic example. The drivers for digital assets are completely different. Singapore has a completely different driver. Middle East wants digital assets to be like the next place from a financial innovation perspective. UK wants to protect the customer. US wants to enforce sanctions compliance. They don't so much care about customer. They are like, we want to enforce sanctions. We care about the money going to the actors that we don't want the money to go to. So I think the regulatory drivers are quite different and fragmented, and I think resilience is one area they've done a great job. And then AI, everyone is trying to kind of learn it, and it's a new thing. So and that has been the challenge, is like, and this is something where we have gone back to regulators, particularly in Europe, and made specifically two recommendations. We've said, like, give a prescriptive guidance. If you don't give a prescriptive guidance, I'll tell you what happens. If you have any regulation and it is not prescriptive, every control function in every organization will have different interpretation of what that law means to them. And then what you have is legal, compliance, and risk with three different perspectives of the same regulation. That's very common, and that creates a lot of challenges in the industry. So what we are saying is, go prescriptive, go very detailed. Don't leave any ambiguity on interpretation of what this law means. And the second thing is, harmonize the regulations, which is causing a lot of footing in the industry right now. You have Digital Operational Resilience Act, you have EU AI Act, you have GDPR, and you're essentially testing the same system. If you're looking at one cloud workload, which has AI into it and which has personal data into it, imagine like three different audits on the same cloud workload. It's not sustainable. So, and we've had these conversations with the regulators, particularly in Europe, and we are like, can you please harmonize these controls so that We just have something, one particular, list of controls to follow through.
Just if I was to just peep in the future with you, do you think the role of the quote unquote risk function is going to evolve, given the AI onslaught that this entire world is going through at the moment, and especially also because maybe perhaps AI is going to become so embedded across enterprises and individuals alike, on day-to-day basis.
I will talk a little bit more, and I've said a lot on LinkedIn about this, and I'm quite fascinated, like, because either people don't want to understand this area, or they ignore it. One of it actually. It's very funny. Like, a workflow software was created to process information sequentially. Let's take a step back to understand that. If you have ServiceNow, and within ServiceNow you have a workflow for access management, and you have another workflow for data protection, you have another workflow for incident management. It's because you have to segment information processing in that area for a certain group of people, because they just cannot process the access management, data protection, incident management together. There is human capacity. We can't process too much information at the same time. Then AI removes that limitation. Then AI can read from different data sources at the same time. So what's actually going to happen is a lot of rationalization of workflows and activities at the same time. So the impact is both on the business side, and the impact is both also on the risk side. And give a very simple example. Like, if you have 4 different individuals, one person are doing regulatory anticipation, scanning regulations, second person doing threat intelligence, third person is benchmarking controls like NIST, AI risk management framework, whatever, and fourth person is looking for fraud and fraud TTPs. They're basically doing the same thing. They're essentially getting information from internet and passing it down to certain group of stakeholders. What do you think is going to happen with AI? AI will do all the 4 jobs and get the information in a format that is needed for executives. So AI will result in rationalization of workflows, and when workflows get rationalized, the underlying jobs will also get rationalized, and that will result in like a lot of centralization of activities. So impact is both on business, and impact is, so business will evolve, so will the risk function, and kind of IT function as well. Yeah.
All right, Sandeep, great conversation so far. Obviously, we've spoken a lot of tech, but I want to kind of now zoom out a little because, I want to understand you as a leader, uh, and, everything to do with your leadership style. Because I think ultimately navigating all of this comes down to how an individual thinks, okay, or how he prioritizes and makes decisions in, say, maybe uncertain environments and ambiguity for that matter. Do you think there are any specific traits or behaviors that you think are consistent across successful leaders in organizations, and something that you imbibe in yourself as well?
Yes, yeah, I can definitely talk about some behaviors, and nothing surprising there. And I'm sure there is enough being said on the internet, but I can pick up of probably things that are maybe more personal to me. We all heard about how much avid readers leaders are. They read a lot. So I read a lot as well, and you can see that I'm very active on LinkedIn, sharing my perspective. Listen a lot as well. Listening is a very important skill. A lot of people uh, don't have it. So leaders listen a lot. Uh, I also have this favorite phrase from Nelson Mandela. Is like, be the last person to say something, because you have got everyone's opinion. Now you have a say. So don't say it first, because then you lost your the card you had. So hear around what everyone's opinion is and be the last person to say. So but if I have to summarize in nutshell, I would say that how you react to situations. that will always get measured in every circumstances, whether you go from analyst to VP to director, director to MD. How you handle situations is how you are going to be evaluated, and that's what it all comes down to. When you go from being like a junior assistant to a leader, how you dealt with situation, how you manage them, and how you reacted in those situations. And generally what happens with people is the reaction to situations can be a lot depend on where they're coming from, the culture, and a lot of aspects that go together in terms of, and what you have to do actually is you have to train you, and it's a tough thing, it's not easy, right? Imagine someone just went from India to Germany, and it's a completely brave new world. Like, they work differently, they process information differently. So I wish I had that guidance. I learned this, like, by burning my fingers in situations. So I think it's very important to understand the culture you are in, the country and the organization culture. Try to be as much aligned to the culture, and then you will understand the real kind of insights and how to navigate your way around. A lot of times people refuse to understand the culture. They think, oh, I'm a subject matter expert. Sure you are, and that's why you have been hired. But then if you don't understand how the organizations work, how people work, you're not going to get people along with you. And a lot of this is getting people along with you. Um, um, there is a great sentence in a book called as a Switch. It says, what you often pursue resistance is lack of clarity. So you have to bring that clarity, and then people will work with you to help you out in situations. So it's a lot of things that goes together in kind of making you a leader, but then not to react, listen, recalibrate yourself to understand the culture of the company and the country you are working in, and then you will find that kind of things start to work out for you.
And over the years, obviously, you've worked with diverse teams and stakeholders and geographies and cultures. How do you think your leadership style has evolved? I mean, if you were to look back at yourself 10 years ago and then maybe today.
Oh, I'll be very honest. I was an angry young man. So I was absolutely, I was an angry young man. I was like, I've done CISSP, CISA. I know the whole thing, and there is a phrase in management, the chip on the shoulder. I'm like, yeah, listen to me. I know architecture. I know security operations centers, and then I had to realize that, hey, no, it doesn't work like that. You really have to share your point of view of the customer, or the person, and let the person work with you. And sometimes change takes time, right? It doesn't happen in a day. So it has been like, and it happens a lot with people who are hands-on expert. I was a hands-on expert, and I realized that I need to understand business. I need to speak in a business language. And unfortunately, I had great managers on the way who gave like a bit of everything to me to land where I am today. But I would completely agree. Like, if I look back 10, 15 years back, I was a very different person.
And before we wrap up completely, let's move into something a little lighter. Uh,
Sure, sure.
Beyond your work, would love to get to know the person behind the title. And coming your way is a quick rapid fire round. Let me know when you're ready. Quick answers, completely instinctive.
Sure, sure.
All right, morning person or night owl?
Morning person.
Okay, coffee or tea?
Tea.
One movie, or a show perhaps you'd never get tired of recommending.
Uh, Alchemist.
Oh, that's a fantastic book. I absolutely loved it. One word, your friends and family would use to describe you today. The earlier one we definitely know, which was the angry young man.
I would say humorous. I'm quite humorous these days. Yes.
If you could have dinner with a historical figure, who would it be and why?
Oh, I would any day. Dinner is a big word, but I would any day go and serve Chhatrapati Shivaji any day.
What's a fun fact about you that most people don't know?
I did 1,000 kilometers at the age of 16 in Marathwada, And I was like, yes, that was like, I can't believe I did it.
And before we let you go, last two coming your way, what's something that you are surprisingly competitive about?
I was like, yeah, I'm a control freak for sure. And particularly like, you probably seen it, my discipline on diary, like, I'm a calendar freak. So I have to be, I have to be very much aware of where I'm spending my, like, everything is planned, like 3 months in advance and things like that. Yeah.
And last one, what's a habit that you're actively trying to quit right now?
Kind of, I have a sweet tooth, and I'm trying to see how do I, because I'm a gym freak. I do gym now. I just came back from gym, but then sugar doesn't help. Sugar.
This has been a fantastic conversation, Sandeep. Thank you for sharing your perspectives and obviously experiences. I think there's a lot that leaders and organizations can reflect on as they navigate, the whole AI piece and obviously the emerging technology risks that are coming into foray. Thank you so much for joining us once again. Any parting thoughts?
No, really appreciate the opportunity. I love to do these kind of sessions. It's important to share your journey, reflections with the broader community, so that others can learn both from kind of your mistakes and your success. So I really appreciate giving me this opportunity, and in a way to give back to the community in terms of things that could be done. Yes.
No, but good. No, so that was the final one. Thank you so much for taking part in it, Sandeep. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe on YouTube, Instagram, or your favorite podcast app. Catch past episodes and more at techdogs.com. See you next time.